The Journey of Learning a Language, a True Story of Luis. Chapter 1. A Challenging Beginning. Luis, a 25-year-old young man from Spain, had always dreamed of living in London. He worked at a small D's company in Madrid, but he knew that if he wanted to advance, he had to improve his English. He had studied English in school, but speaking it in real life was a different challenge. Finally, after months of research and planning, he decided to leave everything behind and move to England. When he arrived at Madrid airport, his heart was pounding. He checked his documents several times to make sure he hadn't forgotten anything. The flight took 3 hours, and during the entire journey, he tried to practice some essential phrases using language learning apps. But when he arrived at Heathrow Airport, his first real challenge began. The immigration officer asked him a few simple questions. What is the purpose of your visit? Where will you be staying? Luis realized that understanding the British accent was much harder than he had imagined. He understood a few words, but when he tried to respond, his mind went blank. With great anxiety, he put together the words that came to his mind and explained that he had come to work and learn the language. The officer paused for a moment, smiled, and stamped his passport. Luis took a deep breath, but he knew this was just the beginning. Chapter 2. Facing Reality. When he left the airport, London felt like a whole new world to him. The busy streets, the advertisement billboards, the famous black taxis, and the people in formal clothes moving quickly. He had to get to the apartment he had rented beforehand. But there was one problem. He couldn't read the signs properly, and when he asked people for help, he realized that understanding their accents was even harder than the conversation at the airport. After a few failed attempts, he decided to use Google Maps, but his mobile internet wasn't working properly, so he had to ask a seller at the airport for help. The man spoke quickly in a British accent. "You need a UK.SIM card, mate." Luis only understood 2 words, UK and SIM card. He quickly realized he needed to buy a SIM card. But when the seller started explaining the prices and internet plans, Luis felt completely lost. He finally chose one of the SIM cards, and after some effort, he managed to activate his internet. Now it was time to use Google Maps to get a taxi. When the taxi arrived, the driver asked, "Where to, mate?" Luis hesitated for a moment and then showed the address on his phone. The driver smiled and said, "All right, hop in." Luis simply nodded in agreement, relieved that he didn't have to say much more. Chapter 3. The First Work Experience. Luis knew that living in London wasn't cheap, and to cover his expenses, he had to find a job as soon as possible. A month before his trip, he had sent several job applications online, and now he had received an email from a small cafe in the city center offering him an internship opportunity. On his first morning at work, he entered the cafe with great anxiety. The manager, a Scottish man named Mike, welcomed him with a smile and said, "All right, lad, let's get you started." Luis only understood the word "started" and nervously nodded. Mike explained that Luis's job was to wash dishes and clean tables. But when customers started coming in and placing their orders, Luis felt overwhelmed. They spoke so fast that he could barely understand anything. A customer walked up to him and said, "Excuse me, mate, can I get a flat white and a croissant?" Luis, feeling confused, just stared at him without responding. After a few seconds, the customer realized. Chapter 4. Moments of Despair. After a few weeks at the cafe, Luis felt like he hadn't made much progress. He still didn't understand most conversations, and sometimes was even afraid to speak. One day, while sitting on the bus, he listened to two English speakers talking. They were chatting rapidly about their weekend plans, and Luis couldn't understand a single full sentence. This made him feel hopeless. Would he ever truly master English? Chapter 5. The Decision to Change. Luis decided that he needed to change his approach. He enrolled in a language class near his home and started practicing with his classmates. He also got a notebook and wrote down new words he heard every day. He also decided to speak more with his co-workers every day. Although it was difficult, he slowly realized that his ears were getting used to the English language. Chapter 6. The First Real Conversation. One day, while cleaning tables, a customer started talking to him. "So where are you from?" For the first time, Luis responded, without fear, "I am from Spain." The customer smiled and said, "Oh, nice. I went to Madrid last year. Beautiful city." The conversation was short, but for Luis, it was a huge victory. Chapter 7. Real Progress. After a few months, Luis could understand customers' orders without any problems. Some regular customers even recognized him and greeted him. Chapter 8. A Better Job Offer. Mike, the cafe manager, was pleased with Luis's efforts. One day he called him over and said, "You've improved a lot, mate. How about working as a cashier?" This meant Luis had to interact directly with customers. He was scared at first, but he decided to accept the challenge. Chapter 9. Gaining Confidence. Working as a cashier improved Luis's speaking skills even more. He learned how to joke and even sometimes talked about football with customers. Chapter 10. The Dream Achieved. A year later, Luis reached a level where he could easily hold conversations. He was now working at an international company and had built a new life for himself. The dream that once seemed impossible had now become a reality. The end of the story.